Hello, and welcome to the cardiovascular system. Today we're going to start by talking about the functions of blood. Blood is the life-sustaining transport vehicle of the cardiovascular system. I really love that description. I think even people who don't know anything about anatomy know that blood is important to living. Like if you run out of blood, you die. So we've had this idea for a long time that it's closely related to health. Also, if you go to the doctor because something's wrong with you, the first thing they're going to do is take your blood because the amount of things in our blood can tell a lot about what might be causing a disease. Functions of blood. So we're going to split blood has like a bazillion functions, but we're going to split it into three different categories so that it's a little bit easier to remember. Transport. Blood is responsible for transporting substances throughout our body. Regulation. Blood also regulates the levels of various substances in our bloodstream. And protection. Blood is responsible for protecting the body in multiple ways. Now let's take a closer look at each of these, starting with transport. So, transport functions of blood include delivering oxygen and nutrients to body cells. When the blood goes through the lungs, it picks up oxygen, and then those red blood cells travel throughout our entire body and it drops off oxygen. When the blood goes through the digestive tract, like the small intestine, it picks up nutrients from food that's getting broken down. And it does the same thing. It takes those nutrients everywhere in the body that needs them. So it takes good things out, which is easy to remember, but don't forget kind of like the opposite function of that is it gets rid of the bad things. So if the blood is going to take oxygen out to all the cells, it's also going to pick up CO2 and take it back to the lungs so we can exhale that waste product. And after the body uses the nutrients, it breaks them down into smaller molecules that we don't need and that we might pee out. So it would take that stuff back to the kidneys. So transport functions include transporting the good stuff like oxygen and nutrients to body cells and then taking away the waste products like carbon dioxide and waste molecules so that we can exhale them and pee them out. It's also responsible for transporting hormones. Remember your pituitary gland in your brain? That's responsible for making a lot of the hormones in your body, but that the hormones don't act on the brain. They have to be able to reach different organs. Like, for example, prolactin, that is the hormone that causes women to produce breast milk. And it's made in the pituitary gland, but it has to travel through the system all the way down to the breasts so that it can tell them what to do. All right, regulation. Regulation functions. Maintaining body temperature by absorbing and distributing heat. We touched on this a little bit during the integumentary system. Like one of the functions of skin was to help heat us up or cool us down. Or if you're like me, my face gets super red when I'm hot. And the reason behind that is because all of my blood vessels are dilated, like they're open wider to be able to release more heat. Or if I'm cold, I look pale because they're constricted. It's also important that blood maintains a specific pH. Enzymes, like our body is run by enzymes, chemicals that help our reactions run faster, and they're really finicky. Like they have to have the perfect temperature and the perfect pH. Our blood is responsible for maintaining that pH. Our blood contains something called a buffer, like a bicarbonate buffer, and buffers are responsible for helping keep the pH of our blood stable. Blood's also important in maintaining something called fluid volume. So you probably have this idea that like there's red blood cells floating in liquid plasma. Now imagine for a second that plasma wasn't there. How would the cells travel throughout the body? Like they wouldn't, or they would like kind of be crusty and like stuck to the side. So we need that fluid in there to be able to circulate our blood. If someone is severely dehydrated, it's actually a circulation problem. And finally, protection. So, two specific types of protection. Number one, being able to prevent blood loss, because, like I said earlier, if you bleed out, you die. So, the plasma contains proteins and it also contains platelets to be able to form a clot so that when you start bleeding, it clots instead of bleeding out. And then it also prevents infection. So our immune system pretty much lives in our bloodstream, including antibodies, complement proteins, and white blood cells. We will talk more about antibodies and complement proteins in our immune system chapter. And that's it. Please let me know what questions you have.